the chasing your dream strategy is really flawed. Like, it's always given by someone who's already like a billionaire. For entrepreneurs or anyone in their career is, not chasing some magical dream that like every day is going to feel like the most fun in the world. It's fun to be good at something. It's fun to win.
Super excited to do this, Greg. It's been great getting to know you. I think the last kind of 6 months or so are both very dear and good mutual friend. Michael Weiss put us in touch, and he, as he put it to me, you're one of the kind of leader goats of the event space, and I should talk to you because we are thinking about that at our media company, and now we're kind of dipping our toe in the water together and rolling up our sleeves, and it's been great. Give us your intro, and I like to kind of plant the seed. Give us your kind of quick life kind of evolution into that first moment that you kind of took that first entrepreneurial leap, because that's what this is all about. This is all about no off button, people that are driven, and that's kind of the stuff we want to learn about.
Yeah, so I the event industry I sort of fell into, like a lot of people do. There are degrees in event management. I don't have one. I went to Fairfield University right out of college. It was not a great job market in the kind of mid 90s. And the first job I got, which was kind of the only job I could get, was I ended up selling food for Sysco, the food service company. Which was pretty not glamorous, right? Like you get like a week of training, a laptop, a territory, and they basically are like, open up restaurants and start selling or starve, right? Is essentially the deal. So I learned a lot about actual selling and connecting with people, and I did it really badly for a while, and it definitely was physically removed from restaurants by chefs that, were mad that I walked in too close to lunchtime and things like that. But what I did learn was about human connection. I learned that, these are just people trying to make a living, and if I eat at their restaurant, they're way more likely to talk to me. If I take the time to actually understand what they care about, why they make the choice they make, in the vendor, purveyor they're going to use, then I could do a better job of actually telling my story, right? As opposed to walking in and saying, I have great prices, I have this, I have that, right? So that was really informative to me. So how I got into events is my father knew someone who worked at Reed Exhibitions, and found out they had sales jobs, and said, my son's, doing well selling food, and have him get it, so it was a get my resume in, and as luck had it, Reed had an opening on a show that served the restaurant industry. So my very limited experience, a year and a half of working for Sysco, was relevant to this company. And they're like, oh, fantastic, come here. So that's how I got into events. I have to admit, the entrepreneurial thing was always nagging at me. Like, there was always, even when I was just a sales rep, where like, make 50 calls or we're going to take away your chair kind of environment, I was always thinking about, at this restaurant show, why wouldn't we have a pavilion or something that serves like the pizza market? Like, I'm running into a lot of vendors who want to sell to pizza shops. Like, why don't we create something? So it always was there in my head, right? And I was trying to stand out. I was trying to be better than the people around me, right? I wanted to advance. And I just saw that's the way I'm going to do it, right? That I'm always going to be the guy coming up with a bit more, right? And advice I give young people all the time is, like, the job was make a lot of calls. So nobody wants to see me not make enough calls but have big ideas. I would outcall everyone around me, and then at 6 o'clock, roll in with, why don't we do a pizza expo, right? Like, that is what made it a right? That is what put me on that track.
Yeah. So let me click on that, because that, I feel like, is the, mysterious drive that so many entrepreneurs have, that, we wonder why, like I'm relentlessly driven too. I started in sales. I feel like that is, a lot of folks start in sales and they're like, okay, but what I heard there was like, okay, like I outworked everyone. What do you think? And, feel free to go back to childhood and all that stuff. But what do you think gave you that in the first place? Because that's how, and to your point, whether it's events or AI or whatever, like you just wanted to win. And that's what we want, to transfer to our people and families.
So two things I would say. I definitely was brought up by parents that instilled a very strong work ethic. So there was no question I was someone who I saw that effort could make up for a lot. I was not a great student as a kid.
Same here. Yep.
Yeah, I was not a great student in college. Academics was just never my thing. And I did kind of recognize that, like, if you think of it through the lens of sports, like, there are 5 tool players, right? Where you're like, that guy's got some gifts. I might have been a 1 or 2 tool player. So I had to really make sure that 1 or 2 tools was amplified, right? Some of it was a bit the realization and desperation that, like, work is going to have to be something you're good at. The other thing that is interesting that I really think from an early age inspired me. My dad was a food chemist, food scientist, and ended up, by the end of his career, he worked his entire career at a company called General Foods, which, so if you're a certain age, you'll be like, I don't know who that is. If you're slightly older, you'll be like, I know General Foods. It's now part of Kraft, right? So a really big global food company. So he was in their R&D department. So from the earliest age, I mean 5, 6 years old, I remember him bringing me. He'd come home, he'd have a box, and he'd have products that he would want me and my brother to sample. Right? That he would say, "Oh, we're working on good days, it was like chocolate pudding, Jello, right? On bad days, it was, like stovetop, right? Where it was like, I don't know how much stovetop I want to eat. So what's interesting is the time I spent around him, and when he retired at 65, they kind of made him retire. Again, this work ethic. He didn't retire. He wouldn't retire. He's open to consulting laboratory. He worked until he was 88. And the only reason he stopped working is he had Parkinson's, and that started to have too much of an effect, and he died a couple of years later. So he was always about invention, and I always had, through his eyes, if he saw something as an opportunity, he'd say, we could do that, we can make that, right? And so I always had this view of, like, oh, anything's possible, right? So I do think, while it has nothing to do with trade
Yeah,
shows,
yeah,
and
of course. That's just the
while he was
vehicle.
certainly
Yeah.
right, while he was proud of me and what I did, like, honest to God, I think at the end he still really didn't know what I did for a living. And every time I'd see him, if he had seen something on the news like CES, right, he'd be like, I saw the news thing at this.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that your show?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'd be like,
Yeah.
no, it's not my
Yeah.
show. Not my show.
Yeah.
So that, I think, always put in me this idea that I have more control over the future than I'm just here to take orders, right? So I think that was very foundational for me, right? The combination of, like, I am going to have to work my ass off, and I've got to be the guy that sees everything, anything and everything is possible.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I feel like with, every podcast video I watch, everyone I talk to, instilling faith that it will work and optimism, and therefore making the hard work easy to do and not feel like work is like the thing.
I think one of my favorite pieces of advice is I listen to a lot of Scott Galloway and enjoy his insight and just his sense of humor and everything else. But one of the things I really love is he talks about, like, the chasing your dream strategy is really flawed. Like, it's always given by someone, who's already like a billionaire. And and I don't necessarily like, I don't listen. I think the events industry, I think live is an amazing industry. I think the industry is remarkably well positioned for where mankind is moving. Do I love it? I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm good at it. I know a lot.
Well, you love what you're
like,
good at, and like
right.
getting great
That's
at
right.
anything is all that
And
matters, right?
if I was good at numbers, I'd be a CFO,
Yeah, exactly.
right? And I'd be a
Exactly.
hell of a good one. I'm just
Yeah.
not, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is something that for entrepreneurs or anyone in their career is, not chasing some magical dream that like every day is going to feel like, you know, the most fun in the world. It's fun to be good at something. It's
Yep.
fun to win,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And whether
Love
I
winning.
stayed in,
Yeah.
right, if I stayed in food,
Yeah.
I could be
You would have
super
wanted
happy.
food. Yeah, totally.
Right.
Totally.
So yeah.
Yeah. No, and that's great segue into like I feel like events are a great way for especially first time founders. It's a great vehicle. It's a if you hustle and do a good job, like it's decently accessible if you compare it especially to, venture capital backed stuff or, most other businesses. It's like I feel like it's unique in that way. Maybe I'm biased. I've seen so many people win at events, and I'm hoping to become one of them very shortly. But yeah, maybe talk about that a bit in terms of it being the vehicle for kind of first time founders, entrepreneurs, the benefits, and what to maybe specifically look for from your seat as an investor, backer, builder.
Sure. So I think I'll give you kind of two perspectives. I think from the last 20 years or so of the event industry, why am I optimistic? And, why do I think when I first got in the business, trade shows were kind of fundamentally about people make stuff and they want to be in a room full of people who buy that stuff. Right. And they were very commerce heavy and they were very much kind of like a key part of like the distribution channel. And in some cases they still are.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
What's changed and what I think has changed for the better. And for a while there, I've lived through several iterations and fear-based kind of opinions of like, the industry is screwed.
AI,
The internet, and then it's COVID now people have figured out how to do it without you. Right. And so what's changed is the value of shows has moved from commerce, while it's still a piece of it, much more to learning and connections and figuring out, can I connect with the right people? And that could be, a lot of different things. That could be trade channel partners. That could be investment, right? I'm looking to raise money and those people are here. That could be publicity. And the education piece, I think, has become like the learning aspect of what is happening in an industry. And, that has become a bigger piece. So it's sort of been turned upside down, like why shows are working today versus 25 years ago. For a founder, for startups, like for people that are, thinking, how do I get this off the ground? I think the first thing I would say is like, you got to answer to yourself, why am I here? Like, what am I trying to achieve at this show? Because you may be in a small booth or a startup pod that a lot of shows are now, actually a lot of shows are creating the entry point for startups. Like they actually are priced and saying, I want 50, 100 small scale, early stage startups. I want them because the ecosystem's interested in them, right? So answer the question, like if you're going to drop $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 on this experience, you really need to know, why am I here? Am I here to meet funding sources? Let's just say that's the case, right? That you're kind of, your seed round and you're like, hey, we need to still raise another $1 million. Well, you're here to then showcase. So I would say use every resource this show has to make sure you're getting in front of the family offices, the VCs, the PE that's there. And you say, what are those resources? Well, almost every modern show now has an app that has like a matchmaking component. You can either pay for those meetings or you could just use an open source app. So put the time in, look for and try to create meetings with 10, 20 of those folks that are there, and make sure you're going to have those conversations. A lot of shows have like pitch competitions, right? So they may say, "Oh, there's a startup stage. Make sure you're on that stage," right? Like, it's, if that's, know why you're there and then use the resources. If you're there for a different reason, if you're like, "Nope, we've raised $20 million, we're fine. We're now looking for actual distribution. Like, we're looking for channel partners." Same advice, right? Like, how are you making sure that you're going to get those conversations, right? And present yourself in the most favorable light. So that is, and you can say, well, again, well, can you speak? Submit a great topic, and for the love of God, don't pitch, right? Like, the worst thing about shows, in my opinion, is, when brands get themselves on the stage, and whether they've done it through, I've sponsored something, and some CEO ends up basically doing here's my company and the features and benefits. Like, you lose everybody. Like, you need to be talking about the impact of, let's just say it's a tech product, right? Like, on your industry. And of course, you're weaving in what you do and how you solve it, but it should be about the industry, right? It should be teaching someone something. So that would be my biggest advice, is know what you're trying to achieve. Once you know that, picking the shows you do may not mean which is the biggest,
Sure, sure. Or even
right?
what
Like,
industry it's in. It could be whatever.
right. So,
That's like,
again, it depends on which category you're talking about, right? I mean, there's a million, there's a show for absolutely everything. But if your company is at a stage where, it really is looking to, fundraising is your main objective, then I would make sure that, like, you look at the shows in your market and say, are there some that seem to have that audience?
got it. Yep, yep, yep.
I want to go to shows where I'm like, oh, hey, I see people from Blackstone are there. I see people from Oakview are there. Right? Versus ones that tend actually look like they're more end product oriented shows. You're not ready for that, right? So,
Got it, got it. Now you're kind of in the investor backer seat. You have On Deck Ventures. Um, kind of building on top of what you just said. How do you look at, like, this is like the holy grail of investing in startups and founders, is like everyone wants to back the best founders. So, and that's where, like, there's like uniqueness to how everyone, judges
so how
people.
do I evaluate?
How do you, what's the gut, the science? Like, when you talk to a founder, hear from them, what do you look for?
Yeah. So one thing to just fill in the blanks on. Yeah. So just to add on my background. So I was at Reed for about 15 years. Um, I grew up into running shows, then running portfolios of shows. I started New York Comic Con while I was there. So I was sort of a fake entrepreneur, I would say, right? Like, so everyone's like, "Oh my God, you created New York Comic Con." Sure. With somebody else's money, with tons of resources.
So
Like,
I would call that
um,
a wise entrepreneur because you hedged risk. Because I think the
I
myth
didn't
is
own
that,
any of it, so I wasn't that wise. So, so I sort of really taught myself I could do this inside of a safe environment, right? Which Reed was great to me. At Reed, I got very involved in M&A. So I started looking at, hey, what do big companies want to buy, right? Then I left and started my own company. I took the real leap, built a business, built a business called LeftField Media, sold it to Clarion Events, and then would become Clarion's CEO. So I've kind of gone, up and down on entrepreneurial big company. So
and
now
then
that I'm
let me real
really,
quickly, can you talk about that transition when you took the real leap into starting, like leaving the safe thing and starting the new thing, and like what you'd advise folks, or like, one, what it felt like, um,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
any learnings from that.
Yeah, so it was super freeing and it was fun, and definitely I loved the idea that we can establish what our company culture is. We can hire who we want to hire. Um The part that was bracing and difficult was just the reality of like, I don't have any resources around me that like payroll and like the insurance for our people and did I capitalize properly? It was all things that were real wake up calls that were like, oh my God, I have to figure this out. Um, so I think the biggest advice I would give is on the good side, be sure that you're starting this for all the right reasons and like you have something you really believe in and like a foundation of something of like I have an insight, I have a product I'm launching or an event or whatever it is. And on the tougher side is if you don't know it naturally, which why would you if you haven't done it yet? Seek the advice of I don't care if it's an uncle, a mentor, a former boss, like someone you just respect and you can get to engage with you, but talk to them about how you like how much money you've raised or how you're raising it, how much of that is, how you're going to run your infrastructure. Those things I did not get right. I was too naive in a bunch of it, and it slowed us down. Um, so I was lucky that I had a really good friend who's a super sophisticated deal guy, and he was so generous with his time. Lou, thank you if you're sitting in the podcast. Um, so Lou was amazing, like in working through. Have you thought of this? Have you done that? And I probably should have taken a bit more of his advice, right? And so that would be the hardest part. But back to the question about entrepreneurs and how do you get, so the advantage I had was I was an entrepreneur. So I kind of knew what it looked like when you had a good idea and that, you had a tiger by the tail. But I had worked at two scaled companies that buy shows, right? So I had total visibility. I had done a couple of dozen deals on the acquisition side. So I knew I have seen exactly what
Pattern
companies want.
recognition. Yeah, totally.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I know what they want in the market you're serving and the size that you're at, the margin you're delivering, retention rates. Like I know what the end game is going to be, right? So the advantage I have as On Deck Ventures when I get involved with a early stage entrepreneur is one, I want to make sure that we're on the same page, right? That we're trying to build something to ultimately get to an exit, right? So the first thing I just look at is this an exitable person and product, right? So if someone were, I'll just as an example, as much as I've had a lot of experience with like consumer shows, festivals, comic conventions, anime conventions, there is a very limited buyer pool for those.
Yeah, yeah. On the exit
So if
side. Yep.
someone right, so if someone were to come to me with a concept and it was a I don't know, like a fan convention for like, electronic dance music. Well, that's a big category, but I would immediately think to myself, geez, who are we going to sell this to? Right. So I start everything through the lens of like, ultimately we want to get to a stage where a Clarion or a Reed or an Informa or Emerald wants to acquire this business. So the main criteria I would say I use is it's a few different points. First and foremost is the founder. It's just about the founder. Are they smart? Do they have a real plan? Are they realistic about executing that plan? Do I like them? And you need to really, for me, where I'm at, I
Life's
have
too
zero
short.
interest.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, I have zero interest in trying to make money over 5 years with someone that I don't like taking their call, right? Like, so I've done 9 deals as On Deck Ventures. The portfolio looks really, really good. One is already sold. The one consistency is, man, I would have drinks or dinner with every one of those people, and to get them all together would actually be a blast, right? Well, but it's not just like it's do they have a vision and are they practical about how they're actually going to make it happen, right? So a person with a big idea, but like there's no supporting, like, oh my God, they really don't know what it's going to, right. From there, it's really about assessing the opportunity. Is it a market that I think lends itself to the trade show live model well? Is it a market that I think has a lot of runway? And by the way, I'm now as an independent, I'm very okay with being early on something. The bigger companies aren't. They want it to be big. They want it to be big.
Yeah, it
Right?
doesn't move the needle. Yep.
You mentioned Michael Weiss AI4, right? So that was actually the first deal I did as On Deck Ventures, and it was 3 years ago. So you might say like, oh, whatever, dude. Like you're not early. That was AI. Everybody knew AI. Listen, years ago was not as obsessively talked as it is today, and the size of that business was not catching the attention of any of the major trade show buyers. So I was able to forge a relationship. The whole logic. I met him. I met his partners. I met him again. And I thought, great guy, smart as a whip. There's a total plan here, right? I see some gaps I can help with, but like total plan. They're in a brilliant sector.
And what year was this again?
23.
Got it. Okay. Yep.
It had everything I was looking for, right? The right founders, right market. I could see this being wildly appealing. Should they be able to win? And in 2023, not one major trade show company would look at that and say, we should get involved. We should acquire this. They just say too small and no way. Well, short, 2 years later, they had explosive growth, 100% growth.
I mean, that's a fast turnaround. I mean, talk about a great, 23 into exit by 25. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah, amazing. And, 23 wasn't the first year they had run in 20.
Yeah, they had traction.
So
yeah.
The point was it grew very, very rapidly into something that was attractive, and Closer Still Media acquired the business in 25, right? So that's the scenario that I would want to see all the time. So, a non-starter could be a founder that's unimpressive, or they don't seem to really have a clue on how they're going to do it. I'm 100% looking at markets that I think are exciting, right? And have a future potential. Like my most recent investment is I'm involved with a show in the longevity market, right? Great founders. I look at that market, and it's not that it's currently massive. I think society is moving more in that direction. I am seeing more and more on the idea of, the idea of what role does medicine and fitness and food play in living a quality, longer life, right? I think it also plays to, this is a real example of how my logic worked. Could totally be flawed. In 3 years, I may tell you I lost my mind, or I'll tell you, it did great. I look at the wealth disparity in the country. And while you could say this is alarming and the middle class is going away, I do think it's alarming. Irregardless of where you might sit in that, like even if you're sitting in that upper tier, it doesn't feel right. But it is the reality of our marketplace. So what I'm seeing on the medicine front is, while we have a huge problem with what do we actually do for organized medical insurance, that upper range is doing more concierge medicine. They are the ones that are fueling. I want to know what my O2 max is. I want to, do cold plunge. I want to do. That's what's funding this, right? So it's like it's just reflective of the world we live in.
Yeah. No, but and an optimistic note on that is that's when you start at the top and do all the R&D and get the wealthy folks using the first round of that stuff. But that's when the Andreessen backed startup comes in and makes it accessible to the whole world. And there's a lot of that happening. So and talk about a great category. Geez, longevity.
So that's if I took you through the investments I've made, they're all in emergent tech. They're all in industries that I'm as much betting on I think that industry is going to be great. I am too early for me to talk about, but I am working on one fan festival kind of a thing, which I do like that market, having been involved with anime and comics. And something just came across my desk that is potentially what I consider like a really exciting new fandom, right? So like if I, listen, when I got involved in New York Comic Con, like the Read exhibitions thought I was absolutely insane. Like I got made fun of for at least a year by colleagues that were just like, here's the guy,
That's funny.
people will,
Blazing your own trail. But there were previous Comic Cons all over the country, so you had good validation.
it did. It's the localish ones were pretty low rent nerd festival kind of events. The San Diego Comic Con was kind of the trailblazer of like bringing in Hollywood and bringing in kind of the video game market. So that was very much the beacon of like, that's what we want to be. But Reed didn't even do consumer shows then. So like the idea of, so you're creating a show where people buy tickets to dress up as superheroes. That's your business model.
Yeah. Yeah.
That, for a company that was a market leader in, security, hardware, jewelry, optics, the optical industry, like, was comical, right? And but once it took off and it did well, it was not made fun of any longer, and people enjoyed the growth. But
Love it, love it. Gosh, so many directions I could go into, but talk about if you can recall some kind of big mistakes you might have made where some of the biggest learnings and evolutions came. Any context, early, mid, late career.
so all of them, being in the event business, when you launch things, there's always a chance, and that chance is not low, that you're just wrong, that you just didn't pick the right market, that you didn't execute properly, that you had the timing wrong, and it's really, really rough because the failure is public,
Yep, yep, yep. Yeah,
right? Like
you're putting on a show. Yeah.
at an event, you end up at an event standing there with less people than you wanted, knowing that you're losing money, knowing that customers aren't happy. It's optically bad. It's terrible. And I've done it too many times.
Okay.
And
Well, it
you
makes
might,
people feel better. It
well,
does happen. So no, don't fret.
100% it happens. And, that is definitely like, I sometimes feel like I've been a glutton for punishment, that I just keep going at it. And the reason I keep going at it is, I'm a baseball guy, as you can see from the pictures behind me, the jerseys and stuff. I am more enthused to hit a home run than I am
Yeah,
afraid to
totally.
strike out,
Totally.
right?
Yep.
And in my career, I've been very fortunate that I've been attached to, maybe a half a dozen like really, really successful like creations or, events that just sort of came out of nowhere and became multi-million dollar, right? And while I have more failures than I do successes, so the lessons, and this is going to ring true because you and I have been talking about starting
Yeah.
something.
And maybe so we're doing diligence now. Maybe talk about like what we need to get right in our diligence process.
So every time I look and think I got it wrong, early on, I was just sloppy. I was just like, that's a fucking great idea, and we're going to go do it, right? And I was such an optimist that I was looking for, like, just if I saw signs of green shoots, I was like, yeah, we should just do it, right? Now I've become fairly obsessive about the idea of, as deeply as possible, understanding who are we building this for? Do we know who the audience is? Have we properly vetted that audience? Have we talked to enough people to in hearing them say, that is a great idea? God, somebody, it's about time somebody's going to do that, right? And really also figuring out, what do they need? What problem are we solving for them? right? Getting that right and researched properly is the best way to avoid standing at the Javits Center with a lot less people than you want, right? So New York Comic Con is actually the first best example where that lesson got taught to me, and I have never lost it. Is right prior to launching that show, the previous year, we started an event that was a health and wellness event in New York City, and we called it Live Well New York. And we were, so you might say, like, oh, you've always liked health and wellness. It was very poorly defined, right? Like longevity is a very specific thing, right? This was health and wellness. And we did a terrible job of, we were only launching it because it was like, oh my God, look at all these stats and how important health and wellness is to people. But what we missed was like, how is this connecting to people? Is this for people that are like, if you had asked me at that time, is this for people that are like full blown into like a vegan lifestyle? And I just said, sure. Okay. Is this for people that actually are trying to lose 100 pounds? Absolutely. Is this for people who run triathlons? Yes, it is. Is this for people who are just trying to find a gym to go to for the first time? Absolutely. Right. What a terrible, dumb idea. Right. So the problem we had is we tried to be just too much to too many people. And we were basing the idea on, look how big this sector is. And we're in New York. So there's 10, there's 12 million people and we ended up with, I don't know, 4,000 people attended. So it wasn't a disaster, but it needed to be 15, 20,000 people to be viable. Right. So definite failure, right? Lost a bunch of money. It just wasn't good. And very thankful. The CEO of Reed at the time, this guy Chet, who's a very smart man, good mentor, instead of yelling at me or, layering on the failure, he kind of put an arm around me and he said, look, it happens. I asked you to do these launches. They're not all going to be great. He said, here's what I want you to do, though. I want you to take a week and I want you to just write me a short report on what you learned from it. He said, because look, you lost $500,000. He said, let me tell you something. If you learn something, that would be the best $500,000 I ever had, right? And one nice, a nice example of real leadership, right? Like I felt like a total fucking failure. And I now felt like, something totally different. So I did. The team and I sat. We ruminated over it. And what we realized is we did not understand who we were building this for. That had we picked one of those niches, triathletes, we would have had a better show if we launched Triathacon, right? If we had CrossFit Con, if we picked something intense, we would have known who it's for and then been able to hone in on them, right? So I went back to him and I said, that's my learning, that we didn't understand our audience, that I would have done this, I would have done that. And at the end of that meeting, I said, so I've been working on this other idea that always felt too small to me, called New York Comic Con.
Yeah.
And I now realize it's not small. I know exactly who this is for.
Yeah,
and these people,
and they're super fans. They're super fans, which is huge.
Fans.
Yeah.
And to not make that mistake again, the team and I worked on how do we get in front of these fans, right? Like, so we identified there's a great retail store in New York City called Midtown Comics, who became one of the first sponsors of the show, and they said, oh, we will gladly promote this thing. And I said, I want to do like a focus group, right? Something you talked about.
We're doing now, yeah.
And I remember we got about a dozen guys, was all guys. We got a dozen guys, all super comic fans, in a conference room, and I had a little PowerPoint, and I was like, have you guys heard of San Diego Comic Con? Everyone's like, oh yeah, of course I have. And I said, well, how many of you go there? Nobody.
Crickets. Interesting.
All New York.
Yeah.
I said, I'm like, so here's our vision. We're thinking it would be really cool to create an event in that style here in New York City at the Javits Center, where we bring in the film industry and stars. And, I explain the event. And I want their reaction. Right there in the first 5 minutes of the meeting, one of the guys at the end of the table gets up. And I'm like, oh my God, is he leaving? Like, I don't know what I'm like, why is he getting up? He's getting his wallet out. And he said, how much is a ticket?
I love it.
And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like this is just conceptual. And he's like, no. I want to buy the first ticket.
Amazing. That's so cool.
He was trying to give me cash in the meeting. And I said, whoa. I said, if we launch this show, we have your emails, you're all going to be invited as my guest, right? Like you're all going to get free pass, right? And in hindsight, at the end of the meeting, there was such enthusiasm in that room. They were like, please do this, but don't do this. Don't do that, but do this. And make sure this needs to be pure. And they gave us such great advice. And they were so enthusiastic. And we continued to do those kind of meetings because foundationally, we knew if this is going to be successful, we have to know exactly who this is for. So you might say, well, that's events. That's nice. What does that have to do with me? I don't care what business you're in. Do you understand who you're making this for and what problem you're solving? If you cannot articulate that clearly.
And what was the problem you were solving for them? That it just didn't exist, or like,
yeah,
because I find that having like a challenge, like what actual problem are we solving for? Like, how would you articulate it in this context for them?
For Comic-Con?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's different because this is a fan thing. So it was
entertainment,
joy.
More entertainment.
Yeah. Entertainment we're creating. It's not a business problem we're solving. So it was mostly for you as a local New Yorker, you have to travel to a city like Philadelphia to go to the closest thing, which is really not all that great. Or fly West Coast, stay in a hotel, do all of that.
So that covered, you got rid of travel, you saved them money, you saved them time. So those are all pains that you're solving. Boom.
One of the things I remember was recognizing was at the time, so comics have become far more mainstream now because of the popularity of like the Marvel movies and DC movies and things like that. At the time, they were far more disenfranchised. These are people that were like
fringe.
Yes. So one of the problems we solved that became a bit of a tagline was, this is their community. And one of the guys in that first meeting said it, and it literally was like emotional, that he's like, one of the things you need to get right. He said, I've been collecting comics since I was a kid. And, in school, I got made fun of.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
He's like, when I go to a show like this, I'm cool.
You're home. Yeah.
You just said the word. Our tagline for many years was, welcome home.
Oh, wow. Boom. That's right? So cool.
And so that is a level of insight that is like,
that's the depth.
As much as this may become a lot of big brands vying for attention and people wanting to take media, it's always got to be home for this community, that they've got to look at it as my special place, right? In B2B, it's not that as much as it is, you have to know, like, is it that like these people all want to have, like, they have a hard time connecting with each other? So one of the reasons, back to just trade shows in general, why I'm so optimistic about live is the world is becoming far more lonely and impersonal. It just is. And there are stats upon stats. Galloway talks about it all the time, especially young men, right? Around how many people actually say like they don't have a best friend.
Yeah. It's bizarre. Yeah, it's crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
And how much time we're spending, in the AI world, right? And,
chatting with bots. Yep.
Right. So events are at their root, they're conventions, cons, right?
Yeah.
They need to, and we are doing a better and better job at figuring out how do we actually make sure people get to meet each other at shows through tech. Let's use the tech to make it productive. But people that walk away from shows saying, I loved that event, that B2B event, those events are pretty experiential. And more than anything, they're saying, I met so many great people,
I met my tribe.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's my tribe. And our job is to, through the parties, through the networking areas, all the means we have is to make sure that like that's our goal now, right? Is it is less about, hey, did that guy sell enough stuff to justify his presence, as much as we made amazing connections. And I think the world is scary in how in-person it's getting. And I'm actually kind of pleased and proud that
To
like
be on
I
the
think
other
the
side.
live,
Yeah.
I think so we will my guess is that the live event industry, not every event, but if anything from all the way, to concerts to to conferences to real big trade shows, I think we fill a void that needs filling. And we will, I think, flourish over the next decade and beyond. So, uh, my bigger worry, if I think about worries, is just global uncertainty, right? Because a lot of shows are really global marketplaces, and that seems to be getting a bit harder to manage these days. Know what the week is, right? So,
Cool. That was lovely. Um, Let me click on and this is selfish for our own exercise, doing some live workshopping here. Like on you said gathering a focus group together. Go deeper on that. Like it seems like, okay, you want to try and find, the niche super fan who has found his home, and that's like ideal. What other signals or just free flowing thoughts on because like sometimes, like I've heard like people in focus groups might say one thing but act a different way. How do you close that gap and like bringing it to our, very kind of dry B2B context of, the private markets, where it's simple. Everyone wants to do deals and trade. How would you maybe think about that?
so yeah, so I think you need to do enough that your data points aren't like, I talked to four guys and they all like, right? So, if you get up to, if you can get up to enough conversations, enough that you start hearing consistent things, right? That's comforting. One of the things I do like to do is there's a point in these sort of customer validations where you're exploring and you're actually sort of asking open-ended questions and like, where else do you go? What are your biggest challenges and things like that. But somewhere in there, I like to go to, can I get them to commit to something? Like I'm going to get specific, right? So an example, if I was with a group and they were pretty engaged, seemed to like our idea, I might go to um, one of the things we're doing is forming a active advisory board. And that advisory board will meet on a quarterly basis. We'll review our content plan. And I would like to ask this group of, there's 10 of you in the room, you know, how many of you would be willing to commit to
Yeah, yeah, that's a
giving
good
us?
signal. Yeah,
And, if everyone's like, yeah, good idea, man. Oh, Aram, you got your great idea. Greg, go, sweet, sweet. And then nobody raises their hand. I'd be like, all right, so they're not that engaged, right? Um, so it's things like that that I would look at. If it's a sponsor or someone that you're actually trying to get money from, the ultimate is, would you, would you be open if I could put together sort of a founding package for you? Would you be open to considering sponsoring this event? Yeah, sure I would. Can you give me a range at which, like, I don't want to overshoot or undershoot? If I was in the 150,000 range, is that like, it's just you got to go for it. You got to try to close, right? To see, ideas are one thing, feedback is one thing, but like, do the dogs actually eat the dog food,
yeah,
right?
yeah. No,
Um,
totally.
so that's a way I like to look at it. Events are tricky in that way because, they're a year away and you're making your commitment early. But like, I've seen enough when I look and say, I know this market's big enough. I know there's a need we've uncovered. We've heard enough favorable feedback right? That I have confidence that like we'll be able to deliver whatever it is, 2,000 people or 1,500 people or, or more if you think it's bigger. But um, it's where I get nervous. I'll give you an example that just happened actually earlier this morning. Is there's a sector I'm getting involved in. I don't know that much about it, and I'm pushing the team to uncover like how are we unique, right? And I haven't heard it. Like everything is like well, we've got It's like well everybody's got content. Like, our content better, and the team got on with somebody, and this guy said, what nobody does. He's like, I really think we could benefit from instead of just sitting in the audience and listening to somebody. I think this industry would really benefit from more like Chatham House rules, like roundtable discussion. And it was like that's the moment that I wait for, right? When I'm like, we're not doing
Write
that.
that down. Yeah, yeah.
Is anybody doing that? Like, now I don't just because he said it doesn't make it that's our strategy now. The next time I'm in a room with customers, I'm like, Aram, hey, quick question for you. How would you feel if we had a Chatham House rules, like hot topic discussion kind of thing? Like, and if you then say like, ooh, that's a great idea because there's some heavy stuff. What? Then it's like, fuck, now we have a point of difference. That's a sleep, right? You're constantly, I think, whatever you're doing. I don't know your customers probably your viewers, listeners, or readers are probably across a ton of industries. But and even if they're like private equity, which I've had a lot of
Yeah.
exposure to,
No, it's a general broad entrepreneurship. It's all the same, right? Yeah.
at the end of the day, whatever you're thinking about, like I've found, like make sure that you have a true point of difference, that it's solving something for whoever that intended customer is, and that you've done enough validation to confidently either quit your job or raise a bunch of money or, pre-sell it, right? Like if it's something that could actually be sort of pre-sold, um, that to me is not an event thing. I think that's a customer thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, spot on. Spot on. Um, cool. Well, I think we've covered a lot. This was great. I'm looking at my little list of questions here, and cool. I've got some like quick quirky, fast ones. Anything you believe the world doesn't believe with you about, and we can go to the next one if you want to think about it. But like, what's that one thing you might believe that the rest of the world disagrees with, going against kind of what's it called, modern convention. And if you want to think about that one,
Yeah, let me think about that one. Yeah.
what are you reading and what are you learning from it now?
What am I reading? I listen. I don't read.
Yeah, same thing these
I'm a
days.
terribly slow reader, but I'm a very fast listener. So I'm currently listening to, which I'm really enjoying, the 1929.
Yeah,
Uh,
Andrew Ross Sorkin. Yeah,
yes, yes. Uh, Really, really entertaining. And I think I'm such a history fan, and that like it helps calm me when you think you're living in the worst moment. No one's ever lived in this moment. And then you kind of look back and you're like, no, actually, like you didn't have to go that far back to
yeah.
realize,
No,
people have lived scarier moments.
it's
Um,
fascinating how far we've
yeah.
come.
So that's book. I'm pretty regular on Prof G Markets. That's like one I listen to every day. Galloway
Galloway's
and
podcast. Yeah.
yeah,
No,
yeah,
he's brilliant.
yeah. I'm also a fan of Gary V. Like I
I love
identify with
his
his sort of difference
marketing
and
stuff, and he's very
yeah,
positive, optimistic. Love it.
super positive. Definitely made me. I always swore a lot when I was CEO of Clarion, and I at moments felt bad about it. Like I would do it at town halls and everything else, but I get myself worked up. And he made me feel like, you know what? Actually, this is just good
No, I
leadership,
think
right?
there's like research that says like people who swear are more honest. Like, and that's why I was like, that I'm done like not swearing. Yeah, come on. I love that. Love that. Love that. Um, any irrational competitive traits? What's your irrational competitive trait?
As I described how I've lived with failure a lot, right? And I've not been afraid of it. I've actually uh almost intentionally
Yeah,
like
fail
pushed
first, fail
myself to
fast.
do
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
And I can live with failure.
yeah. And that's the skill every entrepreneur builder needs to learn. Just don't die and keep going.
That's right. My irrational, or if whatever you want to call it, my trigger, where I'm like, I got no fucking patience for that,
Yeah, okay, cool.
being judged.
Being judged.
I will not be judged,
Oh,
right?
oh, oh, yeah.
So
Fuck
I'm
that.
like I will own like inside of a company, right? Like, I was at a lot of my career is at big companies. I had absolutely no issue in owning and saying, we attempted this, we tried it, we lost, we failed. I learned this from it. We're moving on. I'm going to cover the loss over here. But if somebody questioned me and judged me and were like, why did you even do that? Or doesn't look like you guys really like that, I'll fucking go to war with you. Like I just I can live with my own failure and move on from it. I can't stand
Yeah.
being
And but
being
that's
questioned in that.
usually because the person's kind of a loser. I mean, if they're doing that in the first place, like, do you even care about what they think and why they said it? But I feel you. Oh, trust, I've got my
Inside of
triggers.
companies, that's the culture often of like, you're reporting to them, they get to judge you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like
True.
it was right. It was earlier in my career, but like that's a quirk of mine that I have no patience for.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, totally. Costs of your ambition you might regret today. A little personal. Take it how you wish. Um, because like it's on the thread of like relentless builders. They're relentless builders. So it often comes at a cost. Any learnings, lessons from that?
I worked hard. I did a pretty good job. I have three kids that are 18 to 22 now, and they're great kids. Still am married to the same woman.
Good for
So
you.
there's
Congrats.
uh,
Boom. It's a
and
lot of tests
I
you
did work
passed. It's
really,
good.
yeah. I did work pretty hard at balance, right? Making sure that as much as I traveled and as intense as I was, that I was still present at home and everything else. So I did okay. I'll give myself a B minus on that. The one thing I'd look at and say I did and it was wrong was I allowed myself to think that you're dealing with so much intense stuff that it's okay to avoid dealing with some intense stuff at home, right? That I would, the kids had challenges that are normal challenges and everything else. And again, I wasn't absent, but too often I would say my wife's going to have to handle that because I've got a M&A deal or I'm freaking I'm here providing. So when I look back and I was like that was an absolute excuse
Interesting.
and they
My
could
wife
have
would love you.
benefited
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
they
That's a
could
big
have
one.
benefited from my presence and engagement, right? So while I might have still been there, I wasn't engaged, right? I was, and now I look and say, and now I really, really, I don't do that now. Um, but there were some years there that I'm like, ooh, I'm sorry I did that.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Beautiful. Um, Good way to conclude. Any final notes? Where can people find you?
So back to your question though about how was the question phrased? It was,
What's your one contrarian belief that the world would disagree with you on?
yeah, I don't know if it's the world, but one of the beliefs, a belief that I have that has proven so valuable in my life, and I don't think a lot of people do, is I am always willing to help anybody, like
Spirit of
off the bat,
service. Yep.
100%. And like even when you and I first met, I had zero idea. Were you credible? Did you have a good idea? What, I went into that with my friend and colleague Michael Weiss saying, "Hey," and he reached out to me first, by the way, and said, "I said 100%." Like if I and I thought and I go into every one of those calls with an idea of like, I'm going to assume you're starting an event and I can give you some guidance that would be helpful to you. And I want nothing for it. Like that is my default position on everything. And often that's the case. And I am happy to help. And you might even call again and I'll take your call again. Like I'm never in a, hey, there's not enough in this for me. Right. And this sort of business karmic attitude served me so well in life. One, I feel good about it. But two, the amount of meaningful relationships that came out of those types of introductions is so fulfilling and valuable that I look at it as like how silly that people like often be like, I don't have time for this. What is this? What does this guy want? Right? It's like, well, why are you so fucking important that you don't have 30 minutes?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's funny. I have a bit of a somewhat maybe contrarian take on like I actually believe it's everyone's responsibility to pay it forward if they can. Like it's like no one, obviously we're all free to like make our own choices and all that stuff, but like some cases, like if ex-colleagues wouldn't take a call or help out, I'd be like, well, we worked together for 10 years. You actually should help out. But like, meanwhile, Greg's a stranger and he's like helpful. So it's actually really interesting.
I experienced it on the other end when I left Reed Exhibitions and I started a company, right? And
those are the worst too, when you need it the most. Like, oh,
right.
You're like,
so
dude,
what I
how?
remembered was,
Yeah.
I went from being a big customer, an important guy with a big title at a big place. Lots of people were friendly. Lots of people paid attention. Lots of vendors were like, how can we help? What do you need? Blah, blah, blah. And I'll give you a real example. I don't know if he listens to this, but is I had lots of people that like the calls just wouldn't get returned, right? People that I thought was like, like that they were like, I don't know what he's doing. And I remember one day, I don't know, within the first 4 months of opening up shop, I hadn't even yet put a show in the market, right? So we're working on our first show. I get a phone call from this guy, Bob Priestek, who is at the time the current CEO of the Freeman Decorating Company, the largest decorator in a vendor to the industry. And I thought, like, why is he calling, right? And so I called him back, and I kind of said, hey, but I thought he was like maybe he has business. No, so it was like, Bob, I'm not even on we're working on our first show, and I'll let you know. Like I was sort of almost apologetically like, I don't have any for you. And he was so kind, and we're friends to this day. And I remember he said, he was like, I'm Greg, I'm not calling you to pitch your business. Like, I want to see if I can help. I want to see what you're doing. Like, what can I do for you? Anything. And it was so generous, right? And I'll never forget that, right? Like others in that same position who were like, he doesn't have anything of value, right? Now, keep in mind, 3 years later, I sell the company to Clarion. I then become Clarion's CEO. Well, guess what? Some of those people, they're like, oh, hey.
Yeah.
That startup worked, I see, right? And it's like, oh, yeah, there now, yeah. So I'm not spiteful. I choose to look at the positive.
Totally.
I want to be Bob.
Totally.
Right?
100%.
I want to be Bob. I want to be the guy that's like, what can I do for you? Right. So I'm not saying the whole world disagrees, but they sure don't all agree. That this is the way to do it.
Yeah. No, it's funny. That's beautiful. And I'll give a quick shout out to Scott Danke, who's co-founder, co-CEO of L Catterton, 36 billion under management here in Greenwich. Wonderful guy. And so I remember when I was starting up my thing, this guy's taking me to lunch at his office, just giving advice, has no time, and takes my call. We did our first conference, teed me up with the top guys in the space. Meanwhile, I'm like begging to get callbacks from some like old colleagues. I'm like, bro, like what's happening here? But yeah, I think the wise takeaway from that is just, yeah, like bigger people, Yeah, bigger people are givers, I think, and there's this karmic banker energy or whatever that really plays a role in the world, and I think that's important, especially for entrepreneurs who are creating value. So, yeah, man, that was great.
Yeah. Awesome. This was super fun.
Great way to end.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect way to end. So if anybody wants to chat, you're welcome to put my email and cell phone in there. If anybody.
Cool. Yeah. Give a like, where's the place they could find you? On Deck's the website, or?
You can go to On Deck Ventures, to check out what I'm up to, but, Greg Topalian at gmail.com. Just
cool.
Send me a note.
I'll put it in the notes. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome, Greg. This was great.
Man. Great
Thanks, brother.
Chatting with you.
Bye.
Okay.
See ya.
Bye.